World Amber Tournament, which we already saw one game from earlier, is of course one of the most exciting events every year. And it's also an event that's one of the big favorites of Anatoly Karpov, FIDE World Chess Champion. And in this event, he and Alexei Shirov tangled for the fourth time in a pet variation of the King's Indian that Karpov likes to play with white. So Alexei, it must be very exciting anytime you sit down for a tournament battle with one of the world champions.
Well, it was very exciting for me when I sat down against him first time in 1992, but since I lost that game like a child, already the second game was less exciting, especially because I also lost it almost like a child. And since then, well, I often had good chances against Karpov in many occasions, good chances to win the game, but still, I almost could never beat him and lost something like 7 or 8 games against him, and if to count rapid chess, then maybe even more. So actually, this is Melody Amber tournament where I finally started making some score against him, because 2 years ago in '96, I won one game with black after a very complicated endgame fight where actually he was a little bit better, but probably had to settle down for draw, but tried to win and some moment overpressed. Still, the same '96 year in Melody Amber, he won the other game. So in '97, although one game I was completely winning, but I lost it on time, and the other game where actually we played the same line in the King's Indian defense, I also lost. So I'm just telling all this that I really did not have success against Anatoly until this year in Melody Amber. I managed to win the first game with black in rapid chess, and then even with some big luck, also blind level game. So it's the first time when I could beat Anatoly twice in one day.
After d4, knight f6, c4,
Played g6,
knight f3, bishop g7,
and g3.
Castles.
Yeah. Lately, this system became Karpov's favorite against King's Indian, because like this he also avoids many versions of Grunfeld.
Well, also I know many people try to play this type of setup against him in the Grunfeld, and I've seen him win game after game after game like this.
Yes, because it's very Karpov type of the position. White always gets some very little advantage, and then Karpov knows exactly where he should have his pieces, and his opponents often lose the track. So here I play d6, and after castles I play my pet line knight c6. Which, as you may remember, I played since 1990, when I think for first time I played it against Joel Lothier, the game which was shown in the other video.
So after knight c3, a6.
And this was already fourth time in last year that I played this system against Anatoly. I played it in Dos Hermanos, in Monaco '97, and also in Vacancy '98. And Karpov always goes for the same system against that. He plays rook e1. As you may remember, Joel Lothier played h3 in this position. So, rook e1. So I play rook b8, and he plays rook b1. And this position occurred 4 times in our games. When I first time faced it, I tried here b5. But after he took on b5 and played b4, I tried something like e6, then to move my knight to better square, but in reality Karpov got his space advantage and just killed me. The other time I tried bishop f5, and after e4 bishop g4, with the idea to play e5, d5, bishop takes f3, knight d4, and then have the strong knight on d4. But that time Karpov just played bishop e3. I tried knight d7 in order to create pressure against d4 square, but he played a very strong move, knight e2, and it turned out that I had to settle for e5, d5, knight e7, because knight d4 square, he has more hits there. So Karpov played then h3, I took, and he took, and again the same story. Karpov got his space advantage, then increased it, and although I fought until the end, and some moment I probably had very good wrong chances, but at the end I lost the game. So this was another unsuccessful try. And finally, this year, 98, I became a little bit more successful against Anatoly because I tried a new idea, knight a5, attacking his pawn on c4. But Anatoly was prepared for that. He played queen a4, I played b6, and then he played c5, again going for space advantage. So what happened was that I sacrificed the pawn, knight c4, trying to trap his queen. And later on he did not play very well, so I could win it in one move, and then I had the big advantage in the endgame, but still the game was drawn. Still, analysis of this game convinced me that this was not to repeat, because there was a moment in the game where he could play much better, and after all, after knight a5, c5, again his favorite space advantage. So what to do? I'm facing this system for the fourth time and I can never equalize against Anatoly. So a new try, rook e8. Well, the idea is based on a simple fact that if he plays e4, I play e5, and if he plays d5, I play knight d4. And after knight takes, pawn takes, queen takes, I can play knight takes e4. So that was the idea of rook e8. But of course there are many ideas for white in this position. I saw one game where white played b4. This actually move I would expect from Karpov, because this also aims to get space advantage. But Anatoly decided to be more straight and playing d5, knight a5, knight d2, which is a very well-known idea in similar positions, so to play against the weak a5 knight.
I might point out, Alexei, I once asked Anatoly what he really felt his contribution in chess was. He said that he thought that he really took playing against a weak opponent's piece to the next level. And if you look at his games, you see that time and again, his opponent has a weak piece, and then he targets it. And so, of course, with that realization, then we can understand immediately why he would play like this. Because in the system, the knight on a5 is always considered to be either weak or strong.
Well, Ron, if you gave me this hint before this game, then I would probably expect it. But
Well,
I also noticed Karpov really enjoying the space advantage, so this was the hint I was mostly concerned before the game. But now, okay, the concrete play starts. So I played c5. And, okay, I want to play b5. So he played a3. And now I realize that although my knight is not so weak, I can play b5 and then I will have a square for c4 for it. But if he takes on b5 and plays b4, I take the pawn, he takes, and I play knight c4, he takes it. This position I did not like at all, because he has this b4 passed pawn and he blocks my passed pawn.
And then he has typical maneuvers, bishop e3 to d4, and all his pieces support his pawn and block you.
Yeah, and again, space advantage. So I decided that until the last moment, I should not let him have a fixed structure. So I should try to keep matters as complicated as possible. And I played knight g4. For the moment stopping b4 because his knight is hanging. So of course he protected his knight. So I play knight e5, attacking his c4 pawn and forcing b3 move. But now it turns out that he's playing against my weak piece, because he threatens f4, knight d7, b4, and then I just lose this piece. Okay, if I played, for example, b6, and he would play f4, knight d7, b4, I would have to play knight b7. And then, really, both my knights are so weak that Karpov would definitely demonstrate his level of playing against bad pieces. So instead of b6, therefore, I played b5. And here, Anatoly made a big mistake. He still had to try for the same ideas I showed before. C takes b5, pawn takes b4. Because now, for example, after taking on b4, a4, knight c4, knight takes c4, it's not such a good idea for me to take with the knight, because then he takes on b5 and I cannot get a real compensation for sacrificed pawn. So what I would have to do would be still to take on c4, and it's slightly improved version for me, because in the other line which I showed, my knight would be on f6, and of course it's much more active on e5. And it also protects the pawn on c4.
And if the white e-pawn moves, then you have a nice square on d3 for your knight.
Yeah, so at least it's not as bad as it was with the other line, but still, I don't like very much black's position. So this would be a real struggle for me, especially against such a positional player as Anatoly. Anatoly was probably fascinated by playing against my weak piece, my knight on a5. So what he tries to do is to move away the e5 knight one day and then start playing against a5 knight. So he plays h3, taking the square g4 away from me. But now I can breathe, because position becomes really unclear. So I took on c4, he took back. I took on b1. He took with the c knight, because otherwise he loses the pawn. Now I think I made a good move, queen b6, because his idea is basically f4 to move my knight back to d7. So I should try continue tactical play. So I played queen b6.
Well, now f4 fails to knight takes c4, and his queen is overloaded?
Yeah, so I take back the knight on b1, and he has no compensation for it. But he also has a tactical trick in this position. It's knight c3. It looks like his pawn is hanging, but if I take it twice, he has queen a4 attacking both my rook and my knight, and I cannot avoid material losses. And if I just make a quiet move, like, I don't know, like something like rook d8, just trying to win this pawn, he can always play knight d1, where knight will be standing excellently, and then again f4, getting my knight back, and then I would have problems with the other knight. So, but I found a very interesting tactics in this position, that I can play bishop f5. Well, for the moment it's not even tactic, it's more positional move. And after e4, bishop d7. Now my knight on e5 suddenly became much stronger, because in some positions it can aim for d3 square.
And you do actually threaten to take, because he no longer has his queen a4 double attack.
Yeah, and there is a very nice tactical trick. If he plays bishop f1, trying to defend this pawn in the most convenient way, I have knight b3 move, attacking his knight, and he cannot take my knight because I have knight f3 check, winning his rook. So here he played knight d1. After the game he suggested knight e2 was better. Well, of course, position is still very complicated, but I believe by playing g5, and I have a very good game, because my knight on e5 is very good, and if he plays f4, I take it, and if he takes with the pawn, I put my knight to g6, and later on it will aim for h4, so it will stand good enough. He can, of course, take it with the knight, but then my knight will stay on e5 forever. As it's known that Anatoly always aims for the best position of his pieces, he played knight d1, still threatening f4, and keeping in mind that if I play g5, then knight will be excellently standing on e3, controlling f5 square, and later on he can consolidate his position even more. So of course I could play g5, but when he played knight d1, I noticed that there is some disharmony in his position. It's, for example, if queen was not standing here, I would just play knight d3, taking the rook and bishop. And also I noticed that there can be some ideas on this diagonal. So the first idea which I had in mind, actually I almost forgot that this was rapid chess game, so it was 25 minutes plus 10 seconds per move. So up to this moment, each one spent something like 10 minutes, maybe a little bit less. But here I had to think for an hour, that is 7 or 8 minutes. And I wanted first to play knight b3, which looked like a very nice tactical idea. So after queen takes b3, queen takes b3, knight takes b3, bishop a4. I would be piece down. But if he plays knight f5 or knight d2, I play knight d3 and regain this piece back. So, but still I rejected this because he has knight takes c5, and after pawn takes, some move like maybe knight b2. And although he is very passive, I'm active, but he is pawn up, so I cannot hope for advantage here. And I already felt that the other possibility was something that could bring me the advantage. So I played rook b8, and Anatoly quickly played f4, which proved to be a big mistake. He had to play knight b3, but then I play knight b3 and penetrate. So if he plays f4, I play knight d4, and then he has some weak squares. So in fact, if so knight e3 was not so good. So maybe the right move was rook e3, just to try to prevent me from these ideas of knight d3 or also knight b3, and still threaten f4 actually. So again, my answer would be g5 to prevent f4 and also have the g6 for my knight. In that case, position will stay extremely complicated, but probably slightly better for me. But okay, he plays f4 and allowed a very nice tactical shot. So I played bishop a4, sacrificing the bishop, queen takes f4, knight d3.
So the whole point of bishop a4 was to deflect his queen from the protection of the square for your knight.
Yeah.
And this is not easy to see in advance, but you had to see this before you brought the rook to b8.
Well,
Otherwise,
in fact, I thought already about such an idea, but then I saw that queen would be attacking my rook on e8, so I had to move it away first.
so now what can he do? You're forking his rook, you're forking his bishop, and there's really no line of connection between the two.
Yeah, and also if he plays rook f1, knight takes c1, I have control.